Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more dramatic mafia romance stories like this one. The wedding hall shimmered like a dream pulled straight out of a luxury magazine. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light over white roses, satin ribbons, and guests dressed in designer suits and gowns. Soft music floated through the air, masking the quiet tension hidden beneath polite smiles. Emily Carter stood near the back of the hall, fingers wrapped around a glass of champagne she hadn't even tasted yet. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was only a +1, a last-minute guest, a favor to her coworker who had begged her to come so she wouldn't arrive alone. Emily had agreed, not knowing she was stepping into a world that would never let her go. She adjusted her navy blue dress, simple compared to the glamorous outfits around her. Emily preferred blending into the background. It was safer there. That was when the air shifted. People didn't notice it right away, but Emily felt it, like the room had inhaled sharply. The doors at the front of the hall opened. Silence rolled through the crowd, spreading table by table, whisper by whisper. Conversations died. Smiles froze. Even the music seemed to lower itself out of respect or fear. A man walked in. He wasn't part of the wedding party. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking for approval. He owned the room the moment his polished shoes touched the marble floor. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, no tie, shirt open at the collar like rules didn't apply to him. His dark hair was neatly styled, his sharp jaw set in calm authority. His eyes, cold, unreadable, dangerous, scanned the room like he was memorizing everyone inside. Whispers erupted. "That's him. No way. What is he doing here?" Emily frowned, confused, then caught the words that made her pulse stutter. "Mafia boss." She stiffened. The man was Adrian DeLuca. Even Emily, who avoided news and gossip, had heard the name. New York's most untouchable crime lord. A man surrounded by rumors, illegal empires, silent disappearances, power built on fear and loyalty. Someone you never crossed and never met by accident. Her instinct screamed at her to look away. Instead, her eyes met his. It lasted only a second. But the impact was brutal. Adrian stopped walking. The entire hall seemed to vanish for him. His gaze locked onto Emily like she was the only thing that existed. Not the bride, not the groom, not the 100 guests holding their breath. "Sir." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. Heat rushed through her veins, followed by fear she couldn't explain. Why is he staring at me? She glanced around, certain he must be looking past her. He was. Adrian changed direction. Each step he took toward her felt heavy, deliberate. Guests shifted out of his way without thinking. No one dared block him. Emily's hands trembled. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions and 0 answers. Should she leave? Pretend she didn't notice? Run? Her feet wouldn't move. He stopped inches away from her. Up close, he was even more intimidating. His presence was overwhelming, danger wrapped in calm confidence. His eyes softened just slightly as they traced her face, like he'd already decided something important. "You don't belong here," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Emily swallowed. I was invited." A corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, but something darker, interested. Before she could react, before anyone could stop him, Adrian reached out and kissed her. Gasps exploded across the hall. The kiss was brief, but powerful, not gentle, not rushed. It was possessive, intentional, and final, like a claim stamped into the moment itself. Emily froze, shock stealing her breath. The scent of his cologne, the warmth of him, the certainty in his touch, it all crashed into her senses at once. When he pulled back, the room was in chaos. What is he doing? Did that just happen? Is she insane? Adrian didn't care. He turned slightly, his arm settling around Emily's waist as if it belonged there. His voice carried across the hall, calm and commanding. "She's mine." The words echoed like a verdict. The bride stared in disbelief. The groom looked terrified. Security hesitated, unsure whether stepping in would be a death sentence. Emily's voice finally returned. "You can't just—" Adrian leaned down, his lips near her ear. "I can, and I just did." Her knees weakened. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "You will," he replied smoothly. "Very well." He straightened and looked at the stunned crowd. "Apologies for the interruption. Enjoy the wedding." Then, as if this were the most natural thing in the world, Adrian guided Emily toward the exit. She didn't resist. She didn't scream. She was too busy wondering how her life had shattered and rewritten itself in the span of a single kiss. Outside, the night air was cool, sharp against her burning skin. A black luxury car waited by the curb, engine running. Adrian opened the door for her. Emily hesitated. "If I get in that car, everything changes, doesn't it?" He studied her face, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Yes," he said honestly, "but it already has." The door closed behind her with a quiet, final click. And with that sound, Emily Carter disappeared from her old life forever. The car moved the moment the door shut, smooth and silent like it had been waiting for this exact second, and Emily's heart raced as city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Her hands clenched tightly in her lap while she tried to process what had just happened. Adrian DeLuca sat beside her, relaxed, one arm resting casually along the seat, as if he hadn't just kissed a stranger and claimed her in front of an entire wedding. The silence between them felt heavy, charged with things unsaid, and Emily finally broke it, her voice shaky but firm as she demanded to know where he was taking her. Adrian turned his head slightly, his dark eyes calm and focused, and told her she was safe, that no one would touch her without his permission, a sentence that should have comforted her but somehow made everything feel more dangerous. She told him she wanted to go home, that she had a life, a job, plans for tomorrow, and he listened patiently, then said quietly that her life had already brushed against his world, and there was no such thing as going back after that. Emily laughed nervously, calling him insane, accusing him of mistaking attraction for ownership. But Adrian didn't react, only explaining that he didn't make impulsive choices, that he noticed details others missed, and that from the moment he saw her standing alone in that hall, untouched by greed or fear, he knew she didn't belong to the crowd she was in, or to the small, careful life she was clinging to. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a towering building, and Emily's breath caught as armed men stepped aside instantly when Adrian exited. Their respect unmistakable, their eyes avoiding hers as if she were already protected territory. He guided her through private elevators and long, quiet hallways into a penthouse that overlooked the city like a throne above the world, all glass, steel, and muted luxury, and Emily stood frozen, overwhelmed by the scale of it, by how effortlessly he moved through power. Adrian poured her a glass of water, not alcohol, and told her to sit, his voice softer now, almost considerate, as he explained that he wasn't kidnapping her, that she was free to leave in the morning if she truly wanted to, but tonight she needed to stay because people had seen him choose her, and that made her a target whether she liked it or not. Fear settled deep in her chest as she realized the truth in his words, understanding that his kiss hadn't just been shocking. It had been a public declaration in a world that thrived on weakness. She accused him of ruining her life, and for the first time something flickered across his face, something like regret mixed with inevitability, as he admitted that he didn't intend to hurt her but couldn't pretend he hadn't wanted her the second their eyes met. Hours passed as the city slept below them, and Emily sat curled on the couch, exhausted, listening as Adrian spoke about boundaries, about protection, about how no one in his world would dare cross her now, while carefully avoiding the parts about blood and crime, as if shielding her from the uglier truths. When she finally asked why he didn't just let her walk away at the wedding, he answered honestly that he could have, but he didn't want to, and wanting was something he rarely allowed himself. He showed her the guest room, spacious and elegant, promising she'd be left alone, and before leaving he paused at the door, telling her that the world would look at her differently from now on, but that he would never force her to feel something she didn't. Alone in the unfamiliar room, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the kiss, the stares, the words. "She's mine," echoing in her mind. unsure whether she was more afraid of Adrian DeLuca or of the strange pull she felt toward him. Morning arrived quietly, sunlight spilling across marble floors, and Emily woke to the realization that no one had locked her in. No guards at the door, no pressure, only a subtle reminder that she was surrounded by power she didn't understand. Over breakfast, Adrian told her he had arranged for her to take a few days off work, that her boss had agreed without question, and when she accused him of manipulating her life behind her back, he didn't deny it, only saying he took care of what mattered to him. The honesty unsettled her more than lies would have. As she prepared to leave, heart pounding with the decision, Adrian watched her quietly, not stopping her, not demanding anything, just reminding her that danger didn't disappear because she chose not to see it. At the door, Emily hesitated, realizing that stepping out meant returning to a life that now felt fragile and exposed, while staying meant stepping deeper into a world she had never imagined. And when she turned back to look at him, his expression was unreadable but steady, like a man who already knew this wasn't the end. With a shaky breath, Emily stepped back inside, telling herself it was just for now, just until things felt safe again, unaware that with that choice, she had taken her first willing step into the Mafia boss's world, and straight into his heart. The days that followed blurred together in a strange mix of calm and tension, and Emily quickly realized that Adrian DeLuca's world didn't operate on chaos the way movies portrayed it, but on strict rules, silent signals, and absolute control. Every morning she woke up in the penthouse with sunlight spilling over glass walls and the city humming far below, a reminder that life was still moving outside even though hers felt suspended. Adrian never forced his presence on her, yet he was always there at breakfast, passing through the living room on quiet phone calls, standing by the windows at night like a man guarding an invisible border. He explained the rules simply. She could go where she wanted, but never alone. She could ask questions, but some answers would come slowly. And most importantly, no one touched her, questioned her, or spoke to her disrespectfully. The first time she stepped outside with him, dressed in a borrowed coat and nerves tightly wound, Emily felt dozens of unseen eyes tracking her, and it became painfully clear that she wasn't invisible anymore. People opened doors before Adrian reached them, nodded without speaking, and avoided looking directly at her, as if she carried a silent warning. When she asked him why everyone treated her like fragile glass, he told her calmly that she was under his protection, and in his world that protection was law. Emily struggled with the weight of it, with the loss of anonymity, yet she couldn't deny the safety that wrapped around her like armor. One afternoon, while walking through a private garden terrace overlooking the river, she finally asked the question that had been sitting heavy in her chest. Why her? Adrian stopped, the city wind tugging at his coat, and for a long moment he said nothing, then admitted that power had given him everything except something real. And when he saw her standing alone at that wedding, untouched by ambition or fear, he recognized a truth he hadn't felt in years. The honesty unsettled her more than any threat could have. She told him she wasn't a prize or a symbol, that she didn't belong in his battles, and he agreed, saying that was exactly why he wanted her far from them, not used, not broken, not sacrificed. That night, Emily overheard raised voices behind closed doors for the first time, men arguing about loyalty, territories, and a rival group that wasn't pleased with Adrian's growing influence. And when she confronted him about it, fear sharp in her voice, he didn't lie. He told her danger existed whether she was with him or not now, because her name had already traveled through circles she didn't even know existed. He assured her again that no harm would come to her, not while he breathed, but the intensity of his promise frightened her, because it sounded less like confidence and more like a vow carved in stone. As days passed, Emily began to see another side of him, how he remembered small details about her life, how he made space for her opinions even when they challenged him, how he softened when he thought she wasn't watching. They shared quiet dinners, conversations about music and childhood memories, moments that felt almost normal if not for the armed men stationed discreetly in the background. Yet the distance remained. He never crossed a line, never touched her without permission, and that restraint confused her more than force ever could. One evening, a sudden emergency call pulled him away mid-conversation, his expression darkening instantly, and Emily watched him leave with a glimpse of the man the world feared, realizing that loving someone like him would mean accepting the shadows he carried. When he returned hours later, blood staining his cuff though he claimed it wasn't his, Emily felt something inside her crack, not fear, but concern, and she hated herself for it. She realized then that the danger wasn't just his enemies. It was her growing attachment to a man who lived by rules written in survival and loss. Adrian noticed the change in her, the hesitation in her eyes, and told her she still had a choice, that she could leave with protection and disappear somewhere no one would find her. But Emily understood the truth hiding behind his offer. Leaving wouldn't erase what she now knew, or what she felt. She admitted she was scared, not just of his world, but of herself, of how quickly she was adapting to it, and Adrian listened in silence, then told her fear was the price of caring in a world built on power. As the night settled around them and the city lights flickered below, Emily stood by the window, realizing that she was no longer just a guest in his life or a woman claimed by a kiss, but someone standing at the edge of a choice that would shape everything ahead, unaware that forces beyond the penthouse walls were already watching, waiting for the perfect moment to test just how far the Mafia boss would go to protect what he had claimed. The illusion of calm shattered the night the first real threat arrived, not with gunfire or shouting, but with silence so heavy it made Emily's skin prickle long before anyone spoke a word. It was late, the city glowing below the penthouse like a living map, when Adrian ended a phone call and went still, his posture changing in a way she now recognized as danger. He didn't raise his voice or curse. He simply told her to stay where she was and pressed a quiet command into his earpiece, and within seconds men moved through the apartment with practiced precision, checking windows, locking doors, their presence turning the luxury space into a fortress. Emily's heart pounded as she asked what was happening, and Adrian met her gaze, steady and honest, telling her that a message had been delivered downstairs. No names, no signatures, just a reminder from a rival family that nothing he touched was untouchable. The words settled over her like ice, and for the first time she truly understood that she wasn't just a bystander anymore but a symbol, a pressure point in a war she never chose. Adrian guided her into a secure room hidden behind a paneled wall, explaining calmly how long it would take for the threat to be assessed, where she could sit, what button to press if she needed him, his voice grounding even as fear coiled tight in her chest. She demanded to know if the threat was about her, and he didn't insult her with false comfort. He told her yes, that she had become visible, and visibility in his world invited challenge. The honesty hurt more than lies ever could. As hours dragged on, Emily listened to the muted sounds of coordination beyond the walls and felt anger rise beneath the fear. Anger that her life had been rearranged by a kiss she never consented to become a declaration of war. When Adrian returned, exhaustion etched into his face, she confronted him, accusing him of dragging her into danger, of confusing desire with destiny, and for the first time he didn't deflect. He admitted that choosing her publicly had consequences, that it had been reckless by his standards, but said quietly that regret didn't change responsibility, and he would bear that weight alone if he had to. His words softened her fury, not because they erased the fear, but because they carried accountability instead of excuses. The next day, security doubled, routes changed, and Emily found herself escorted through a city she barely recognized, every move calculated, every stop pre-cleared, the normal rhythms of life replaced by protocols and contingencies. She hated how quickly she learned them. At a discreet cafe closed for maintenance, she watched Adrian negotiate with allies over coffee, his tone polite, his eyes sharp, realizing that power here wasn't loud, it was surgical. When a man dared to question Emily's presence, Adrian didn't raise his voice. He simply ended the conversation, and the room shifted in response, a reminder that control could be absolute without being cruel. Later, alone in the car, Emily asked him if she was safer with him or because of him, and the question landed between them like a blade. He answered slowly, admitting that both could be true, and that the line between protection and possession was one he watched carefully, because crossing it would mean losing the very thing he admired about her, her independence. That night, Emily dreamed of the wedding hall again, the kiss replaying in slow motion, but this time the gasps turned into warnings, and she woke with a start, deciding she couldn't remain passive any longer. She told Adrian she wanted to understand the rules fully, not to be shielded like a fragile object, but informed like a partner in her own survival. He studied her, measuring the cost of that request, then agreed, laying out the realities without glorifying them, explaining alliances, rivalries, and why symbols mattered more than bullets. As he spoke, Emily realized that fear had been narrowing her world, but knowledge expanded it, even if the truth was dangerous. The days that followed tested her resolve when a public appearance was deemed unavoidable, a charity gala where Adrian's presence would signal strength rather than vulnerability. Dressed elegantly, nerves humming beneath the calm mask she practiced, Emily walked beside him into a sea of watchful eyes, aware that every smile was a calculation. When a stranger brushed too close, Adrian's hand found hers, not possessive, but steady, and for a heartbeat the fear eased, replaced by a complicated trust she hadn't expected. The night passed without incident, but the message was clear. She could stand in this world without breaking, and that realization changed something fundamental between them. Back in the penthouse, the city quiet below, Emily told Adrian she wouldn't be hidden away, that if she was going to be a target, she would also be visible by choice, not fear. He didn't argue. He nodded, respect flickering in his eyes, and said that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the decision to move anyway. As they stood together, aware that the first threat had only been a test, Emily understood that the path ahead would demand more strength than she'd ever known, and that the Mafia boss who had claimed her with a kiss was now bound by something deeper than ownership. A promise forged in responsibility, danger, and the fragile beginning of trust. After the gala, something between Emily and Adrian shifted in a way neither of them spoke about, yet it colored every moment that followed, like an unspoken truth hovering just beneath the surface. The penthouse no longer felt like a cage wrapped in luxury, but like a place where she had a presence, a voice that mattered, and that realization unsettled her more than fear ever had. Adrian began including her in conversations he once shielded her from, not the violent details but the intentions, the strategy, the careful balancing of power that kept his world from collapsing. Emily listened, asked questions, challenged assumptions, and to her surprise, he welcomed it, even adjusted decisions based on her perspective, admitting once that she saw consequences others ignored because they were blinded by loyalty or ambition. The days grew fuller, structured, and demanding, and Emily found herself adapting with a resilience she didn't know she possessed, learning how to read rooms, how to notice exits, how to stay calm when tension thickened the air. Yet with that growth came moments of quiet intimacy that blurred lines she told herself not to cross. Late-night conversations over the city lights, shared silences that felt intimate without touch, laughter that came easily despite the weight of their circumstances. Adrian remained careful, almost restrained, as if constantly reminding himself where power ended and choice began, but his eyes betrayed him, lingering a fraction too long, softening when she smiled, darkening with something dangerously close to longing when she challenged him. Emily noticed it all, and worse, she felt it too, a pull she tried to rationalize as gratitude or proximity, but knew was becoming something deeper. The fragile balance they maintained cracked the night an unexpected incident forced them into close quarters. A sudden evacuation due to a security breach that turned out to be a false alarm, but left them alone in a safe house miles from the city, cut off from routine and distance alike. The house was quiet, stripped of luxury, designed only for function, and the simplicity made everything feel more real, more exposed. With no distractions, conversation turned personal, drifting from childhood memories to regrets neither of them shared easily. And Emily learned about the losses that had shaped Adrian into the man he was. The betrayals that taught him control was the only reliable currency. When she spoke about her own life, her small apartment, her quiet dreams, her fear of being ordinary, Adrian listened like every word mattered, telling her that ordinary was rare and precious, and that she underestimated the strength it took to remain untouched by corruption. The honesty between them grew heavy, charged, until silence fell, thick with everything they weren't saying. When a storm rolled in, thunder rattling the windows, Emily startled despite herself, And without thinking, Adrian reached out, steadying her with a hand on her arm, the contact brief but electric, sending awareness spiraling through both of them. He pulled back instantly, jaw tightening, apologizing under his breath, but the damage, or the connection, had already been done. Emily realized then that the danger wasn't just external threats or rival families. It was the way her heart was responding to a man she knew could never be safe in the way she once imagined love should be. That night, unable to sleep, she paced the quiet house, wrestling with the truth that leaving now would hurt more than staying, and that frightened her more than any threat ever could. Morning brought clarity sharpened by exhaustion, and when Adrian told her they would return to the city once security cleared, Emily surprised them both by saying she didn't want to be moved like cargo anymore, that she wanted agency in decisions affecting her life. Adrian didn't resist. Instead, he acknowledged that partnership didn't mean equality of power but equality of respect, and promised to honor her choices even when they conflicted with his instincts. Back in the penthouse, life resumed with new intensity, and Emily noticed subtle changes. How Adrian trusted her presence during tense meetings, how he sought her opinion before public appearances, how his people began treating her not just as protected but respected. Still, the line between them remained unspoken but strained, like a wire pulled too tight, and the moment it finally snapped came during a heated argument sparked by a decision Adrian made without consulting her, one that put her at risk in the name of strategy. Emily's anger erupted, raw and honest, accusing him of falling back into control the moment fear resurfaced, and Adrian fired back that he refused to gamble with her safety. The argument escalated, words sharp with emotion they'd both tried to bury, until silence fell again, heavier than before. In that stillness, Emily realized she wasn't angry because he'd decided for her. She was angry because she cared, because the thought of losing him twisted something deep inside her. Adrian saw the truth in her eyes and faltered, the mask cracking just enough to reveal vulnerability he showed no one else. He admitted that caring for her terrified him more than any enemy ever had, because it weakened his resolve and sharpened his fear of loss. The confession changed everything. They stood there, close but not touching, aware that stepping forward would mean crossing a line that could never be erased. Emily finally spoke, telling him she wouldn't be claimed by fear or power, but if she chose him, it would be because she wanted to, not because the world forced her hand. Adrian nodded slowly, accepting the boundary with respect that felt like devotion, and said he would wait, no matter how long it took. As night fell over the city once more, Emily understood that love in this world wouldn't arrive gently or safely, but if it came, it would be deliberate, hard-won, and powerful enough to challenge even a mafia boss who believed control was everything. The warning came without ceremony, slipping into Adrian's life the way all real threats did. Quiet, precise, impossible to ignore. And Emily sensed it before he said a word, noticing the way his focus sharpened, the way the room seemed to tighten around him as if bracing for impact. He didn't hide it from her this time. He told her plainly that a rival syndicate had decided patience was no longer profitable, that negotiations had failed, and that someone intended to force his hand by testing the one boundary he had drawn too publicly to retract. Emily listened, heart steady despite the fear threading through her chest, realizing that knowledge had changed her. She was no longer shocked by danger, only alert to it. The plan Adrian outlined was careful and defensive, involving decoys, rerouted schedules, and layers of protection designed to absorb impact without exposing weakness. But Emily recognized the truth beneath the strategy. This was about pressure, about forcing Adrian to choose between power and restraint. She told him she wouldn't disappear into hiding, not now, not after everything they had built on honesty, and though his instinct flared to argue, he stopped himself, choosing trust over control in a way that cost him visibly. The day unfolded with meticulous precision, meetings held in secure locations, movements staggered, communication clipped and coded, and Emily moved through it all with calm determination, aware that eyes were watching, weighing, calculating. The attack, when it came, wasn't violent in the way movies promised. It was surgical, a near miss designed to send a message rather than spill blood, a vehicle forced off course, a crowd disrupted just enough to create chaos without casualties. Emily felt the rush of adrenaline as security closed ranks, felt Adrian's presence at her side like gravity itself, and in that moment she understood the depth of his promise. Not that nothing bad would ever happen, but that he would always be there when it did. Afterward, in the quiet that followed the storm, anger burned hotter than fear, and Emily confronted the reality that someone had tried to hurt him, a fact that crystallized her resolve rather than breaking it. Adrian expected her to recoil, to demand distance, but instead she asked what came next, how this ended, and the question surprised him more than any threat could have. He told her there were no clean endings in his world, only balances restored through strength or concession, and that he intended to end this without dragging her deeper than she already stood. The words sparked a fierce response in her. She refused to be treated as collateral damage, insisting that being informed and involved was not the same as being consumed, and that her agency mattered even when the stakes were high. The argument that followed was intense, but different from before, less about control and more about alignment, and when it ended, it did so with mutual understanding rather than victory. That night, as the city hummed below, Emily admitted the truth she'd been circling for weeks. She was in this, not because she was trapped, not because she was claimed, but because she chose to stand beside him, eyes open, heart steady. Adrian listened, the weight of responsibility settling deeper rather than lifting, and he didn't respond with promises or declarations. Instead, he asked her what she needed to feel safe in a world that would never be gentle. Her answer was simple and devastating in its clarity: honesty, respect, and the freedom to walk away if she ever needed to. He gave his word without hesitation, understanding that the promise bound him more tightly than any vow of possession ever could. The days that followed were tense, marked by strategic moves and subtle shifts in alliances, and Emily watched as Adrian navigated them with a blend of restraint and resolve she hadn't seen before, choosing outcomes that minimized collateral damage even when harsher options beckoned. His people noticed the change, too, the way decisions now carried an extra layer of consideration, the way the boss listened more than he spoke, and though no one questioned it aloud, respect deepened in quiet ways. When the rival syndicate finally pushed too far, crossing a line that threatened not just Emily, but the fragile balance of power, Adrian responded decisively, ending the conflict with a precision that left no room for retaliation while avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. The aftermath was calm in the way only earned peace could be, heavy with consequence but free of immediate danger. In the stillness, Emily found herself grappling with the realization that surviving together had forged something stronger than attraction, something rooted in trust tested under pressure. She told Adrian she needed time, not distance, but space to understand who she was becoming in this world, and he accepted it without protest, arranging his life around her needs rather than the other way around. On a quiet morning, standing by the window as sunlight traced the city's edges, Emily reached for his hand, not out of fear but intention, and the simple contact carried more meaning than the kiss that had started everything. Adrian met her gaze, searching for doubt and finding none, and in that moment both of them understood that the greatest risk they faced wasn't the violence of their enemies, but the vulnerability they were choosing together. The world had struck back and failed to break them, and as the city moved on unaware of how close it had come to chaos, Emily knew the final test wouldn't be about survival, but about whether love chosen freely could endure in a life built on power, and she was ready to find out. The morning after the last threat passed, the penthouse was unusually quiet, the city below moving in its usual rhythm, unaware of the chaos that had tried to touch them. Emily sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't really tasted, while Adrian moved silently behind her, checking messages and making calls with the precision she had come to recognize as a mix of habit and instinct. For a moment, she allowed herself to forget the danger, the rival families, the constant surveillance, and focus solely on the man she had chosen to stand beside. She watched his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the calm in his dark eyes even when the world tried to shake him, and realized that the attraction that had struck her in the wedding hall had grown into something far more complex, something deeper, something unshakable. Adrian finally noticed her gaze, paused mid-call, and his lips curved into the faintest acknowledgement of her presence, that small gesture speaking volumes about the connection forming quietly between them. He hung up his calls and came to stand beside her, brushing his hand lightly along hers, careful yet deliberate, an unspoken reminder that she was no longer invisible in his life. Emily turned toward him, breath-catching, and asked the question that had been growing in her mind for weeks. "Why me, Adrian? Why did you choose me in front of everyone, knowing how dangerous your world is?" He studied her for a long moment, his eyes dark and unreadable, before answering in a quiet voice that carried the weight of honesty and power. "Because you were different. Not afraid to be yourself, not blinded by ambition, not swayed by fear. You reminded me there are things worth protecting beyond power and empire, things I never thought I could have." Emily felt her heart hammer in her chest, and the walls she had built around herself for safety trembled under the weight of his words. She tried to speak, but no words came, so she let the silence stretch between them, letting him see the truth reflected in her eyes. Adrian took a step closer, closing the distance just enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, and for the first time he didn't claim her with words or a kiss. He offered her a choice. "I'm giving you control," he said softly. "You can walk away, you can stay. The decision is yours and I will accept it without question. No pressure, no claims, just honesty." Emily's mind raced, thinking of all the days she had spent at the edge of his world, the dangers, the whispered threats, the sleepless nights, and yet somehow the love, the trust, the intimacy had grown. She realized that leaving now would mean abandoning everything she had learned about strength, courage, and connection, and she couldn't do it. "I want to stay," she said finally, her voice firm but trembling with emotion. "Not because I have to, not because anyone claims me, because I choose you." The relief that passed over Adrian's face was subtle but unmistakable. His jaw softened, his eyes glimmered, and for the first time since the wedding hall incident, he allowed himself a small, genuine smile. He reached for her hand fully this time, intertwining their fingers, and Emily felt a rush of certainty and warmth. "Then we begin together," he said quietly, almost as if he were marking a contract, but one written in heartbeats and trust rather than paper. The days that followed were different. Danger still existed, rival families still whispered, and the shadow of Adrian's empire stretched over every decision. But Emily no longer felt like a pawn or a target. She felt like a partner, a presence respected and valued, navigating a world built on power with someone who refused to let fear dictate the terms of their connection. They trained together in ways subtle and practical: how to notice surveillance, how to read subtle threats, how to trust instincts honed by years of necessity. And in the quiet moments, they shared life's ordinary joys. Coffee on the terrace, laughter over stories from their childhoods, music played softly in the background while the city buzzed unnoticed below. Adrian's hold over his empire remained, but Emily's presence introduced a new kind of balance, one built on respect, understanding, and an intimacy forged in trust rather than possession. The pivotal moment came one evening when the skyline was painted gold by sunset, and Adrian turned to her with that calm intensity she had grown accustomed to. "You know," he said, voice low, "I've been patient with everything else, but with you I can't hold back anymore." Emily's heart leapt, anticipating a claim, a kiss, a declaration, but he continued differently. "I'm not asking you to belong to me," he said, "because you already choose to be here. I'm asking you to let me love you fully. Not as a boss, not as a protector, but as someone who needs you." Emily's breath caught. The words carried no pressure, only raw honesty, vulnerability masked beneath a veneer of strength. She reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face, feeling the heat of his skin, the solidity of him. "Then love me," she whispered. "Fully, no rules, no fears." And in that moment, Adrian's world, the dangerous, shadowed world of power, threats, and allegiance, didn't vanish, but it changed its shape around them, bending to accommodate a fragile yet unbreakable bond. They kissed then, long and deliberate, no longer a claim but a choice shared freely between them. The kiss carried months of tension, fear, longing, and trust, a culmination of everything they had faced together. When they finally pulled away, foreheads resting against one another, Emily knew her life had been rewritten entirely, not by force, not by fear, but by the decision to step fully into love with a man whose world was as dangerous as it was intoxicating. Over the following weeks, they navigated public appearances, rival threats, and the quiet challenges of blending a life built on power with one built on choice. Emily discovered strength in herself she hadn't known existed, and Adrian learned that even a mafia boss could surrender to something more profound than control: the deliberate, fearless act of loving and being loved in return. And though shadows still lingered, and dangers would always exist, Emily and Adrian faced them together, united not by circumstance or fear, but by the deliberate choice to walk side by side, hearts aligned, in a world that had tried to claim them in every way possible. Finally, on a night when the city sparkled like 1,000 fireflies below, Adrian held her close, whispering the words that had been building since the wedding hall. "You're mine because you choose me." Emily smiled, resting her head against his chest, and whispered back, "And I always will." In that moment, the past, the threats, the chaos, all of it, faded into the distance, leaving only a future they would navigate together. A future born from a single, life-changing kiss that had rewritten both of their worlds forever.